If Bill C-9 passes, it's going to make us more like the United Kingdom, where every day over 30 citizens are arrested over what they say on social media.
Well, last night was interesting. We had a Justice Committee go on from 3:30 in the afternoon Eastern Time to 11:30 that night, only to get a specific amendment, a specific piece added to Bill C-9, saying they will be, and they adopted the idea of taking out the religious exemption out of Bill C-9, meaning there are certain scriptures, certain things you do, certain things you acknowledge in your place of worship is now going to be deemed illegal. So this is fascinating. This is a big moment. And today we wanted to kind of change it up a little bit. Instead of me just talking about these things, who is not a lawyer, who does not have a legal background, we figured to bring on the man of the hour, the man who founded the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, who is fighting to make sure we uphold our Charter of Rights and Freedoms in this country, making sure that the government is held accountable to the bills that they pass, and making sure that your freedoms are not trampled on. We have the founder, John Carpe. How are you doing, sir? So happy to have you.
So glad to be with you and with your viewers and listeners.
We are very grateful for you to take your time, your expertise to discuss these issues, as well as other things that are happening in this country that are, I'd say, tenuous at best at this point. And we are witnessing a very huge culture war happening in our country at this point. And I'm sure that really puts you at the center of a lot of different issues, and almost might stretch you thin at various points because there's so much happening all at once. But before we get into a lot of the details of other issues, what's your first take, and what's kind of the first thing kind of came to mind when you saw Bill C-9 come down and all the issues that have been surrounding it at this point in time?
If Bill C-9 passes, it's going to make us more like the United Kingdom, where every day over 30 citizens are arrested over what they say on social media. There's thousands of people in jail because they sent out a tweet or other social media disagreeing with immigration policy, or saying there's too much immigration, or we have the wrong kind of immigration. And C-9 takes us in that direction because it removes one of the safeguards that protects Canadians from getting prosecuted, which is that the Justice Minister, the Attorney General, has to consent before prosecutors can prosecute a Canadian over hate speech. So in Canada, we typically see 1 or 2 or 3 per decade. These are very far and few in between. Bill C-9 would get rid of that safeguard. And so local police, local Crown prosecutors can just decide on their own. If they feel that something's hateful, they can charge somebody with hate speech. And then the other thing that you alluded to is that the Bloc Québécois has made a deal with the Liberals to support Bill C-9 if they get rid of a defense that is available to a Canadian who's getting prosecuted. And that is, if in good faith you are expressing an opinion based on a religious text. And that would protect pastors and priests and Orthodox rabbis and imams from getting prosecuted if they teach what their sacred scriptures say about human sexuality.
Right. And that's kind of what the example I gave. And I'm curious, I mean, we don't know at this point. We're kind of, we're speculating at this point. But the example I gave is something even as simple as, say you're not even trying to make a point about a specific scripture, but you read the scripture and you post a sermon online, or again, talks about, say in 1 Corinthians, it talks about homosexuality. Even so much as reading that passage could likely get you in trouble if you get on the wrong side of a specific official in this country. Is that kind of what this is opening up to?
It opens the door. I think initially, okay, so if this bill passes in current form, I don't think that tomorrow or next week or next month, the authorities would start immediately to prosecute people who are reading or teaching their scriptures. However, it opens the door, and we're in a very dangerous cultural climate where we do see authorities going after people. A nurse in British Columbia, Amy Ham, was found guilty of professional misconduct because she said on Twitter that there are only 2 sexes. We have a woman in Ontario, Amy McKay, who has been critical of transgender ideology and how it harms children. The Ontario Teachers College wants to take away her teacher's license because she said on social media that transgender ideology, that she disagrees with it. I could go give you so many examples of Canadians that are getting in serious trouble or who are being censored at public meetings. Their microphones get turned off. They're getting threatened by their professional regulator, like their College of Physicians and Surgeons, their law society, just for stepping out of line on the speech front. So what that means is if Bill C9 passes, it definitely opens the door to people getting criminally prosecuted for publicly preaching and teaching their scriptures on controversial topics.
Right. And that's where a lot of the conversation's been around. It's like, well, if you teach on this, if you preach on this, then we're going to come after you. There's also a lot of just a lot of uncertainty around what this bill really is all about. And this is where, again, it's tough for the regular person to get into the nitty gritty of some of these bills because, well, the language is so convoluted. And it's hard for the regular person to kind of catch on to like, what is right? What's wrong? What's the black and white here? Could there be with the way, and as you said, in the bill's current form, is there a potential possibility that just not even trying to make a point, not even trying to preach, just simply reading this out in public could get you in trouble?
Yes.
Okay.
But again, it won't be, these people that want to take away our rights and freedoms and destroy religious freedom, destroy freedom of speech, they're smart. They're not going to immediately start to launch hate speech prosecutions against people for publicly reading their scriptures. They're not going to immediately ask to have the Bible banned as hate speech. We did have a federal cabinet minister, Mark Miller, I think it was, who said that the passages in the Bible that teach about homosexuality are hate speech. Said that himself. So we've got some pretty clear signals. So the short answer is yes, it does open the door to that, but you wouldn't feel the pain initially. These people work incrementally to slowly take away our rights and freedoms. They do things today that 10 years ago would have been unacceptable. 10 years ago, Nurse Amy Ham would not have been found guilty of professional misconduct for saying that there's only two sexes. But they make the culture worse and worse. And then the worse that the culture is, the more aggressive they are in censoring truth and common sense.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think let's start keep playing in the future. This is where your role essentially comes in. So say the bill ends up passing, it ends up being brought into law in the new year. Where do we go from a regular person's perspective of being able to defend themselves if they are brought up in one of these charges? Is there a defense from the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to be able to have this hold up in court to defend yourself in court? Or are you kind of likely, you're just going to end up having to deal with being charged and dealing with the consequences of it?
Well, the Justice Center has a team of lawyers across Canada, and we provide legal representation without charge to people when their freedoms of association, religion, conscience, expression, peaceful assembly, the right to bodily autonomy, when these rights and freedoms get threatened by government, the Justice Center, which is funded by donations, has staff lawyers available to help. Problem is, in a country of 40 million people, our 10 lawyers are a pretty small amount, even though it sounds like a lot of people. And we are forced to say no to the vast majority of requests for legal help that are coming in. But in terms of challenging C9, I mean, look, the important thing always is for Canadians to not self-censor. And Canadians, we pride ourselves on being nice. Your mother probably said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Or maybe you were taught as a child, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And those are good things. We should be nice. However, not at the expense of allowing lies to dominate our culture. And so a lot of Canadians legitimately, they are terrified of name calling, right? Nobody likes being called hateful, homophobic, bigot, transphobic, sexist. people cringe at that kind of name calling. But here's the important point. If you capitulate to fear of name calling and you're no longer speaking the truth, our culture is going to get more and more rotten and ugly.
What I hear you saying right now is it actually is incumbent upon the individual to stand up for themselves, put their chest out, and making sure that they do, as you said, don't capitulate, because then you'll start seeing a lot more of these types of cases coming your way, even more than you already have now, that you have to say no to, unfortunately, because people were just, got crippled by the idea of being name called and not standing on conviction or in what you just said, the truth of what we are currently seeing, and so much in being vilified for simply having a difference of opinion based on what the overall narrative is being pushed. So that's fairly unfortunate. But I am curious. It kind of moves me into another question I have for you, especially what's happening in Alberta currently, where you've had Danielle Smith really address the issue of kids who identify as being trans. And a lot of people were not very happy with the idea of Alberta, I think it's New Brunswick and Saskatchewan, introducing laws that, wait until you're 16, you can make those decisions. But right now we want to make sure we protect the parental rights of knowing what's happening, and that they should be able to seek consent if you are looking to change your pronouns, if you're looking to change your gender. We need this consent from parents, and this has been a very huge point of contention. So from your perspective, where is that balance of, advocating for parental rights, but as well as the autonomy of a child's body? Like, where does that all lie, and how do you approach cases like that?
Well, Alberta's law prohibits the sex transition surgeries for minors under the age of 18, which is good. I mean, your mind doesn't fully develop until you're 18 or 20. Some people say for young men, the mind's not fully developed until they're 25. You can make irreversible decisions. If you're a girl taking testosterone, you're going to get a deep voice and your puberty is going to get blocked. And then when you're 18, when you stop taking testosterone, you're not necessarily going to go through natural puberty again. And boys that take puberty blockers and estrogen, they're not going to develop. They will never, if they change their minds later, they'll never be able to become fathers. And they certainly won't be able to become mothers. So these are decisions that teenagers should not be making, permanent, lifelong decisions that are going to result in sterility, infertility, where you can never become a mother or a father. And we protect our kids by saying that, you can't get a tattoo unless you got parental permission. You can't purchase or consume alcohol or marijuana. You can't join the military. And the list goes on and on and on. You can't drive until you're 16. In most, if not all, provinces. So suddenly, why would we stop protecting children and pretend that children are super wise and can just make all these adult decisions when it comes to the impossible quest of trying to become a member of the opposite sex, which you cannot achieve that in any event. It's just simply impossible. No matter what drugs you take, no matter how you mutilate your body with surgeries, you cannot become a member of the opposite sex. So why encourage kids to even, try this when it's impossible? All of that is background. In Alberta, the law was passed that parents have to be notified if their children are starting on a transgender journey at school. And that typically starts by using names and pronouns of the opposite sex, dressing like the opposite sex, joining the sports team of the opposite sex, using the bathrooms of the opposite sex. Parents have a right to know about what's going on with their own children, and that's pretty basic. Now, that was challenged in court by LGBT gay rights group AGAL, that said that children have a constitutional right to be keeping their own parents in the dark about the gender transition stuff, which is ridiculous. They actually won an interim injunction, and then the Smith government responded by opting out of that court ruling and using Section 33 of the Charter, the notwithstanding clause.
that on top of, I think, 3 other times they've now used the notwithstanding clause in Alberta with similar types of cases on different topics at this point. The reason why I'm bringing this up in terms of, the argument that a gal made in this court case, the reason why I want to harp on this and kind of dig into it is because I just want people to be prepared for what the arguments are coming from the other side, trying to understand where you kind of get in their minds, understand where this is coming from and how you're able to have a discussion with people who have this belief. And I think it's really important that we do have these talks so that we can bring people together. So when it comes to their argument here about, children having a constitutional right to, in your words, keep parents in the dark, what does the law actually say when it comes to the rights of children? I actually am not 100% sure on this one. So I'm genuinely curious to your perspective.
Well, the law traditionally has been that children are protected by their parents. So children have a right to the protection and nurturing and guidance of their own parent. The whole idea of having children's rights that are at odds with the rights of parents to know what's going on with their own children, that's a completely novel concept. It has no tradition or roots in Canadian law or in Western civilization generally. There's a Supreme Court of Canada ruling that was pretty clear on saying that the charter right to life, liberty, and security of the person includes the right of parents to raise their own children without state interference, unless there's serious pressing concerns, right? And sadly, some children are abused or severely neglected, and it's necessary for an outside authority, social workers, the government, whatever, to step in to protect the child from their own parents. That's the exception, right? It's like we don't ban all people from driving cars just because there's a few impaired drivers on the road that are causing serious damage. We don't take away everybody's right to drive a car because of some impaired drivers. So in the same way, in law, we don't take away the rights of parents to raise and educate their own children just because there are a small number of very abusive parents.
You bring up the exception piece, and I think that part is always very interesting because, like you said, over the past 10 years, it's always been an incremental work in terms of how the government operates. And I do find, or have found, there are groups that will use that exception to be like, well, parents are abusing their children because they're now not allowing them to transition. How is that combated in terms of how our law is structured in Canada?
Look, some people advance crazy ideas just through repetition, and they assert them with great confidence. But we're at a point in our culture, some things just need to be called out as being false and ridiculous and outrageous. But yeah, these lawyers are clever. They go into court and they make these crazy and outrageous claims, but they dress them up as modest and reasonable. I mean, we're talking about something that's medically impossible. Yes, you can have surgeries, you can take drugs, you can look like the opposite sex, but ultimately, and then the strange irony is they will say that transgender identity is immutable, it's unchangeable. Sexual orientation is unchangeable, but yet we can change our bodies to become the opposite sex. It doesn't make any sense at all. It's also the state of the law. I mean, it is currently illegal in Canada for parents, if their children are embarking on a transition, it's illegal for doctors, psychologists, priests, pastors, rabbis, parents to dissuade their children away from that and to encourage children to embrace their own body. There's an example of clever language. That legislation was passed under the auspices of banning conversion therapy. So that's the slogan they used, and everybody's in favor of that. Oh yeah, we shouldn't have conversion therapy. And they passed this law that now makes it illegal to help children to embrace the reality of the sex that they were born with.
And that was the Bill C4 back in 2021. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very fascinating. Well, appreciate you kind of bringing a lot of this, your lens to the conversation on this. When it comes to how long has the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms been around? It's 2010.
15 years. 15.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's from your perspective now? You've been doing this for 15 years, and this has been a lifelong thing from my understanding of your biography, is you've been trying to fight for constitutional freedoms for your entire career as a lawyer. Are you seeing has there just been a trend upwards in terms of cases that you've had to really take on over the past few years because of different bills that have come down the pipe?
Well, things are slowly getting worse, and they might continue to get worse in the short run. We're paying the price of having abdicated our responsibilities as parents to raise and educate our children. The law follows politics, and politics follows culture, and culture follows education. And so in our education system, for decades now, children are getting indoctrinated into transgenderism, into neo-Marxist ideas about critical race theory. There's all kinds of garbage that is being pushed on children from kindergarten right on up through to university. And it's been a little bit like the frog in the boiling water. They say that if you put a frog in cold water on the stove and the water heats up slowly, the frog won't jump out. Whereas if you toss a frog into hot water, it'll jump back out immediately. But if you put the frog in the cold water and put it on the stove, the frog will boil to death without knowing it. And that's been the challenge in Canada, is that we've had a lot of bad ideas in our education system for decades. And now we are reaping the rewards, and it is a bitter harvest.
I'll leave it off with this last question. Actually, there's two, but one major one, then one kind of a little add-on here is from what you're seeing happening on the political level, especially the type of work you're in, you kind of have to keep an eye on bills that are coming in that's going to impact the criminal code. Is there anything that you're seeing right now, especially from this parliamentary session, of bills that are catching your eye, being like, okay, that's going to be trouble if that ends up in law?
We've got a number of bills that are very bad. Some of them are quite lengthy, would take a long time to explain. Top priority right now is for people to call their MP, whether your MP is Liberal, Conservative, Bloc, NDP, Green. Call your MP and urge him or her to vote against Bill C9. And you can keep it simple and say, if you don't vote against Bill C9, I'm not going to vote for you in the next election. Very simple. We've seen the government back away from other bad legislation when there's enough Canadians that contact their MPs by phone, by email, by snail mail if you want to. We still have a Canada Post system. But the government backed away from Bill C2, which was going to authorize Canada Post to read your letter mail without a warrant, which was going to make criminalize the use of cash in larger amounts. Terrible piece of legislation, but there were so many Canadians that contacted their MPs that the government's backed away from Bill C2. So we need the same thing on Bill C9, Combating Hate Act. Nice name, but terrible legislation. Canadians need to contact their MP and say, vote against Bill C9.
That's totally fascinating. I think I really appreciate the call to action there. And last but not least, I'm curious, just out of curiosity, how many cases do you take on in a year?
Well, during the height of lockdowns and vaccine passports, we actually had over 300 cases. That included a lot of cases of people getting prosecuted for violating health orders because they exercised their freedoms of conscience, religion, their freedom of association, their freedom of expression. So we had hundreds of cases at one point. Today, we still have dozens of cases where our lawyers are defending religious freedom and free speech and the other rights and freedoms.
Right. Fascinating. Well, we really appreciate your work. Really appreciate taking the time to come on and talk about these things. What's your parting words of wisdom for the Elevate crew and our Elevate listeners, and what they should be aware of?
Well, I would say we need to practice courage and speak truth to power and not give in to the fear of name calling. That's very important. You have to exercise charter rights and freedoms. It's like a muscle. If you were to spend 16 hours a day watching TV and you never do anything physical other than sitting on the couch, your muscles are going to atrophy. And so the same thing with our charter freedoms. We need to exercise them. Secondly, we need to cultivate the virtue of perseverance. We're not going to solve our problems in the next few days or weeks. It's going to take, or months, it's going to take years and decades to transform our culture. So we have a culture where government is our servant and not our master. And so perseverance is just really important. We got to keep on going and not get discouraged. Thirdly, be involved in the democratic process. As an example, contact your MP about Bill C9, but be actively involved federally, provincially, municipally. That's so important, because the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. So we need to be engaged in the democratic process.
Oh, wise words, wise words. And where can we find you? Where can we find the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms?
So Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms is JCCF. So you can go to our website, jccf.ca, and we have an email newsletter that you can sign up for if you want to keep up to speed on our court cases and projects. And we send that out only once or twice per month. So if you sign up for our email newsletter, you won't be getting a daily or weekly. It'll just be once or twice a month.
Amazing. Well, John, thank you so much for taking the time out. I know we definitely appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on your show.